I want to get into the article you wrote over at Substack about this Civil War. First, explain why this is not Mind for Survival, what you're doing over there at Substack. And I'll make sure I leave the link to this in the description as well. So what are you doing over at Substack?
Yeah, well, the thing with Mind for Survival is I try to keep it clean. I try to keep it politics out of it. This isn't, I don't think it's that political of an article. And it does get a little, kind of a little bit of what we talk about here in it. So rather than throw it up on Mind for Survival, and I want people to be better prepared, because the more people, I don't care if they're liberal, conservative, wherever they lie, the more people that are prepared when things happen, that's a good thing for us. Right. So, I threw it up on Substack. So I started a Substack so that way I can kind of go put my stuff up over there with that and kind of keep it. And the other part of it is why I don't put political stuff on Mind for Survival is I don't want to get the ESG hammer coming down on me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we've had Daisy on the show. You see what doing anything political on a website gets you. I don't want that to be affected by that, because again, I want that word to get out there. I want people to get better prepared. So I figured Substack's out there. It's easy to do. I didn't have to set up a website. You just go post. And so that's where I went and did this over at If you go to substack.com and just put in Brian Duff, it'll pop up.
It gives you a little bit more freedom to put your personality into the articles and stuff without having to worry about, is this preparedness related and all that stuff. Yeah, I completely get it. But I was reading this, and it's a pretty interesting article, because what you talked about was how, and I'm not going to go through, I might go through a couple of bullet points, but we're not going to go through everything. But you talked about how it is not just us right now talking about a civil war happening. You linked to an article in here about Bill Gates talking about it on a Forbes article about how we're headed in that direction. There are a lot of people that are talking about, I think, I forget what the stat is, but it's like 60 or 70% of American people think that we are headed towards some sort of civil conflict or something in the near future. Not in the future, in the near future. So kind of what your point was with this article is that's kind of how it starts off, correct? It's talking about, hey, man, this is not some fringe idea. This is something that is pretty mainstream.
And the mainstream, and depending on what the mainstream media is pushing or trying to do, they'll act like it's a fringe idea. And I'm not I'm not a big Bill Gates fan. And Bill Gates is out there. He said political polarization may bring it all to an end. We're going to have a hung election and a civil war. And, earlier in the show, we talked about like all these things, or maybe it was on Sunday's show. We talked about all these things, or Wednesday's show, excuse me, that are happening. And we tend to look at them in isolation. But if you look at the start of a big change in something, a big plan to change something, you're going to have all kinds of stuff possibly happening. We tend to look at things as slow burning. It could be, and this is really slow burning, like all these different events. So when I see Bill Gates coming out, who, he's all in on their stuff and he's saying it. And then they said there was a quote I had in there from the Washington Post that said, that there's a broad variety of voices, including Republican and Democratic politicians, academics who study civil strife, and extremists on both ends of the spectrum, that now accept the idea that civil war is either imminent or necessary here in America.
Yeah. Well, you see everything going on and everything getting pushed in that direction. There is absolutely nothing that would make you believe that we're trying to work on issues, that we're trying to fix issues. Everything from the president down is about dividing people, is about getting people more ramped up, is all leading to this. And then you add in the economic factors and the geopolitical factors. Again, like you said, we were talking about all this stuff that could be, just all coming together. We could literally be in one of the craziest elections since, I don't want to say in our lifetime, because that Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton one was pretty crazy, but we could be in for it as far as the election's concerned. At the same time, there could be some sort of growing global crisis that could be leading to some sort of, I think you did say this in the last show, some sort of World War III type thing at the same time as we have domestic, civil war here. I mean, all of that at the same damn time. I mean, that's literally possible. I don't know how likely, but it's literally possible at this point.
Well, you think about it, if they were to go get us into like that, what's going on with the Nord Stream pipeline, if all that comes back and it's on the U.S. and we end up in some sort of conflict, people in the U.S. aren't going to be happy.
Yeah.
Like you have a lot of people on both sides that are very not anti-war. Like, hey man, if somebody screws with us, I have no problem going and jacking them up. And if it's legit, right? But I think people are so gun shy now. You think about it in the United States, right? Where I talk about in the article is another civil war possible. And my premise with that section is, of course it's possible because it's happened in the past. And we always think we go back to, the 1860s and the American Civil War. But remember, our revolution started as a civil war, right? It was basically the English Civil War of the Americas, right? That was a civil war. So in our, I don't know, what is it, 200 and nearly 50-year history, we've had two civil wars, right? If the South had won, the South would be calling it their revolution. Just because we won the first one, we call it a revolution. If the English had won, they would have called it an uprising, a civil war, whatever. Then we moved to the next civil war. Well, because the Union won, and they call it a civil war because they tried to break away from us. So we've already been in two civil wars in 250 years. So what's the chance that we have another one?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What are the chances? Because I talk about in there that they happen because people are not happy with their government. Typically, sometimes you get a faction that kind of does stuff. Here, it's mostly because people are unhappy with their government. Like, so what are the chances the government's going to start doing things that make people, happy with what they're doing? I don't know. We talked about the economy continuing to go down the drain and everything else. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I paused on this picture right here because a couple reasons. Your dog's cuter than hell. He's just cool looking. But this sign right here kind of sums up the reason or part of the reason we're so divided and everything, where there's an actual free speech zone where we've lost sight of what this country was founded on and all that. And this is, I don't know where this was. I assume, California. But
yeah, that's at the gates, the entrance to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. Right. And so it's hilarious. Like, hey, no, we're all about free speech, but just not here, over there.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. Go over there and do your free speech.
Which flies in
by definition, when someone tells you where to go to speak, to have free speech, it means it's not free speech.
Yeah. Yeah. It flies in the face of everything American. You got a free speech zone. Yeah. Hilarious.
Yeah.
Also in this little segment right here, you've got a paragraph here to talk about the definition of civil strife is not only is only a step to civil war. So 25 deaths due to political violence is civil strife, right? And then it's or is that correct?
Yeah.
20 deaths due to
that's the Center for the Study of Civil War in Norway. They define civil strife as 25 deaths in a year, right? That's civil strife. And then what they say is civil war is 1,000 deaths in a year. Well, back in the summer of love in 2020, I believe we hit 25. I know we eclipsed 20. So we're definitely having civil strife kind of. We're in that ballpark.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, do you think it's, I mean, it'd be crazy to get to 1,000 for a civil war, but I don't think how far apart are we from that? I mean, if you go out and you have Antifa shoot up a bunch of Trump supporters one day, or something happens, or so it could be a false flag. Someone dressed like Antifa or someone dressed like a Trump supporter does something the other side. I think people are so edgy. I think it could happen quick. Yeah.
And you think about it, that is a large number. When you think about how a situation would have to evolve to grow to a number that big, but at the same time, it really isn't. And when you think about how this stuff, and you've got a couple case studies in here from different civil wars, when you think about how all of this stuff usually starts with something that's not all that big of, I don't want to say small scale or anything, but something that's not huge, but it evolves, and the more that it goes, the bigger it gets, like exponentially. So to get to that 1,000 number, I don't think would take much. And I think in this country, if we did reach that tipping point of 1,000 people, That would be, I think, the beginning of something just massive kicking off. It's and I don't think it's all that unrealistic to think that that's possible either, because there are tensions high on all different edges of the spectrum with this crap these days in this country. I mean, everybody's got a super staunch opinion on one thing or another, and they're willing to, defend it at all costs, and it flies in the face of somebody else's opinion. So we're and it's kind of globally as well. I mean, that's us here in the United States. And then we got the quote unquote leaders, stoking the flames, fanning the flames, all this crap. So,
yeah.
You talked about in this article, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I don't know, you can't really call this political unrest related necessarily, but in 2018, there were 15,498 murders in the United States. I was looking up trying to correlate
15,000
correlated, but yeah.
15,000. Yeah, that's insane. And you've got a couple of case studies in here. You're talking about the English Civil War, and I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, where this was called the Revolution, but it was absolutely a civil war. You got the Spanish Civil War in Spain from 1936 to 1939, and then the Bosnian War, which is one that we kind of talk about quite a bit in preparedness circles, because the Bosnian War was Selco, right?
Yeah. Well, and think about it this way. The American Civil War was largely between the militaries, right? I mean, you had when the British, I think when they had seized Boston, right? When they locked Boston down, you had civilians involved, and there was times civilians were caught in the middle of stuff, but it was militias and armies facing off. And that was the fight. That was kind of the same in the Spanish Civil War, and why they had a lot of people coming from around the world. It was a fight within the country. It was people in the country squaring off against each other. So the two militaries were based upon sides in that nation. And then the Bosnians, we had the whole deal going down in Bosnia. We talked about with Selco. Again, that was neighbors and towns fighting one another. Mm-hmm. So we have this skewed thing, I think, in America, where we think about this stuff as in the Civil War, General Lee out there lining up against General Grant or whoever the hell was on the other side, and vice versa. We think of it in terms of, General Washington fighting Burgoyne and all these people in the American Revolution. We look at it as Mel Gibson, the Patriot, right? We're fighting the Brits, and people would watch the battles, kind of stuff. That's not what the Spanish Civil War was. That's not what the Bosnian War. That was neighbor fighting neighbor, town fighting town. And that's the scary part about a civil war.
Yeah. It makes you think, and I know we've talked about before how it's going to be a lot more convoluted than a left versus right type thing. But it really makes you think, if it does turn into something that is, politically motivated to, this is the right way or this is the right way, how that would unfold, because you've got basically the flyover states, the whole center of the country for the most part is on the right. And then you got the coasts who are separated by the whole middle of the country that are all on the left. So geographically, that would be pretty interesting.
Well, I think it's even, I think that states would eventually, if it lasted long enough, would come to some sort, it would settle out where a state was largely one way or the other. But you look at California, right? And I talk about this in the article. California had 10 point something million people vote for Biden. More than any candidate's ever gotten in the history of California. And they had 5.5 million people vote for Trump. More than any Republican has ever gotten in state history, and more than 1 million he got in his first when he got into the presidency. So what that means is you have 5 million Trump supporters in California. And while it's dominated by Democrats, if something were to kick off, that's house to house. I mean, that's neighbor to neighbor. And granted, you have areas where Sacramento, the Central Valley, and Northern California, inland areas, like where Sarah was from, that tend to be conservative. Mm-hmm. But I know Trump supporters in Los Angeles, diehard Trump supporters. They've had rallies out there. There are not a lot of them, but you look at like Iraq, most people weren't involved in the insurgency in Iraq. Right. Most people were just trying to, but it was this huge thing and our military couldn't. So I think it would start off, it wouldn't be state to state. It would be states trying to deal with all these enemy within it. You look at Atlanta. I mean, Georgia's conservative. Atlanta's super liberal. Well, how would that work out? So I think you would see large metropolitan areas that are largely Democrat dealing with all kinds of mayhem happening around it. Like, what are they going to do? Is Los Angeles going to go invade Bakersfield or something like that? No, they're going to have, if this thing kicks off, they're going to have plenty of problems in their own home. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for watching.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, you can help us defeat the censors by liking, subscribing, and sharing this or any of our videos. Don't forget to click the link below and visit the website. Over there, you can listen to any of the older podcast episodes and also get on the email list.
And best of all, you can help us give the finger to both the apocalypse and the censors alike.